north-northeast and quite strong, about at the moment force 5 I would say, somewhere around there. Temperatures around the 13 or 14 degrees. I don't think it's going to be as sunny as yesterday or the day before that. But I don't think it's going to be quite as sunny. But possibly with that wind a little bit cooler. But anyway, it's around to you, Martin. Your signal dropped a bit on your last over, Martin, with USB, but no great problem. You didn't go below 9. Excess of the 9. It did last over.
Live, Ray, still a good signal. Brian, you're womping in here for scope. Well, but I can't say a particular potential for them when needed, and particularly the little storage or the digital scope, which I purchased a couple of years ago, is extremely. And very pleased with that. And again, what you got for the price was phenomenal. The only thing that I'm really lacking is a tracking generator for my spectrum analyzer. I've got an HP spectrum analyzer which I managed to acquire, but it has no tracking generator. It's the 8594 or 8596, I forget now. But without the tracking generator, and that's a real pain for alignments and things. And I have got a noise source which I can use if you want to actually measure something. Then that's actually quite good. You can put the analyzer on averaging, and you get quite a good response out of it. But of course, that's a fairly slow process. So for tuning stuff up, it's not that great. Right, let me see what else. Oh, just one other thing on Budapest. I'm boring everybody to tears. But one of the things I also noticed was that. All the folk there were very hard working, and even in the sort of street cafes, of which there are many, there were some fairly sort of brawny, tattooed-looking characters that normally you would cross on the other side of the street to avoid. In their sort of 20s and 30s, who were waiting at table. Who were actually, delightful, and nothing like as fearsome as their tattoos made you think. But also, they worked absolutely flat out. They were running around doing this, that, and the other with a smile on their face, and sort of slightly incongruous because you expect them to sort of pick you up, beat you, and spit you out. But it wasn't anything like that at all. So I was very impressed, but not just by their friendliness, but by the work ethic as well. Anyway, enough of that. I've written down here. Oh, Switzerland. Yeah, well, I never found anywhere that was cheap to eat. If you're still listening, well, sorry, Brian. Well, I say the last time I went was a few years ago. It went out for a reasonable evening meal, and it was pretty terrifying. But lovely country, I have to say. Right, so let me see. Weather-wise, well, the sun is sort of just about coming through the cloud, but it is a fairly high cloud this morning, but not very dense, obviously, but there's a bit of sun, and I say I haven't stuck my nose out the window, and it's coolish out, but I haven't actually seen what the temperature is, but it's certainly dropped a lot in the last couple of days. So it goes over to you there, Ray, again with a pause in case anybody else has emerged from the undergrowth. G3V, just make sure, yeah, G3VTD, G3YJO.
Yeah, it is early in the morning, Martin. Sometimes the recall of call signs falters a little from G3VTD. Yes, okay. Okay, on the Budapest people, I think the poorer countries tend to have a much stronger work ethic, and we frequent one particular restaurant in Pefkos where we go, which is very nice. It looks out over the Aegean Sea, and it's a little bit Shirley Valentine-ish. You sit on the table with this most magnificent view. And last year they had a Greek lad, and he was grumpy, he was miserable, and in my words, I would have said he was bone idle. But he's not there this year, surprise, surprise. This year they've got a Albanian lad, and he couldn't be more pleasant. He never stopped. He didn't sort of lean on his elbows at any time. He would be cleaning tables, he would serve people, he'd be taking orders. And I spoke to the boss, who I know quite well, and I said, "You've got a good guy there." He said, "Yeah, we've noticed." He said, "He's absolutely excellent." He said, never sort of leaning on his haunches. He's always doing something, and it's something that's constructive as well. So you do tend to see that, and I've seen the Albanian lads doing the stonework out that way. Stonework that they put together. Talking about expense, I always thought the Channel Islands were quite expensive, Brian, but I could be wrong. I mean, if you're used to it on a day-to-day basis, that's what it is. But I don't know how it works out pro rata with the UK in terms of costs. I got amongst this stuff, the final comment on this order from China, I got a little electret mic on a PCB with an amplifier and a little preset, and there's just 3 wires, earth, positive, supply, and then the audio out. And I'm tempted to use that inside the hand microphone number 3 or whatever it is, for the one valve that I've got, just give it a little bit more audio quality, or maybe even switch between the two. That'll be an interesting concept. And Symphony Studio, I got you down at the museum today, so if you are still listening, very good morning to you, and thanks for coming back early doors. Right, I've plenty to do. I'm going to nip to the GPs and do a blood sample this morning, so that's good, isn't it? Straight back after a week's sampling red wine in reasonable quantities. And I've got to go for a kidney function test. There's nothing wrong. It's just once a year whilst you're on antihypertensive tablets. They check your kidney function, but I don't mind. These things are all sort of backups to make sure the old machine is still functioning. So I'm going to get some breakfast and get off down there. So hopefully speak to you all tomorrow morning, and it's good to be back. So 7 3s, and thanks very much for the care. So I think it's to you, Brian. We'll be listening, but I shan't come back for another over. G4LJC with G3YJ on the side. G3VTD signing, listening once round. Very good morning.
Yeah, fine, Ray. You dropped down quite a bit at the end of that over. Yeah, I did mention that it's expensive here, Ray. You obviously weren't listening or didn't hear me at the time. Everything's more expensive here. Everything. Food, clothes, absolutely everything. Property, rent, you name it. It's more expensive here. Air travel, from Guernsey anyway, is very expensive. Typically, return fare at short notice, let's say, to a day trip to go to hospital in Southampton. And this was the last time I went, it was 4 years ago, I had to go. It was about £170 just for the day trip out in the mid-morning and back early evening for an appointment up at Southampton Hospital. Medical fees are very expensive. Visit to the doctor is £50 minimum, and that's got a subsidy of £12 on it before, so it's £62 in real terms. If you call out an ambulance and you're not among the St John's ambulance scheme, it's about £435 I think to call out an ambulance. Everything is so expensive, so possibly I wouldn't have noticed the higher expense in Switzerland or Austria, because I'd be more aligned to it. Petrol is horrendously expensive. Electric is pretty much more expensive than you've got in the UK, because we've got no means of shopping around at all. and we're paying about 18p a kilowatt hour, plus standing charges, of course. Unfortunately, we're not bad off as the people on Sark or Albany who are paying in excess of 50p per kilowatt hour for their electric. So, yeah, you know, things are so much more expensive. Right, I'll make this my final. I'll put it over to you, Martin. And I'll make this my final. I'll get the breakfast going early. I've got some shopping to do. My eldest son is getting everything ready for his visit to hospital, which he's going to be in signed in and I guess pre-med by 11 o'clock tomorrow morning for his operation. So that's playing on my mind a little. It doesn't matter how old they are, you still worry for them. Anyway, round to you, Martin. And cracking signal this morning, Martin, no problem at all with you. But signals in there. We're in that summer doldrums now, I think. It came in with a bang, and it's a sort of normal summer propagation on 80. I can remember years and years ago, Martin, that it wasn't so pronounced, and you could, at any time of the day, you could go on 80 and call CQ on sideband or whatever, and you'd nearly always get a reply. But nowadays it just sort of goes dead during the day. But back in the early 80s, and before that, when I was just a listener, I was first licensed in the 70s as a Class B licensee. There was always activity on 80 meters all day long, no matter what. G3YJO, GU4LJC with the group, 730.
G4LJC, G3YJO. Just the obligatory twitch of frequency here. Yeah, fine, Brian. Well, signal holding up very nicely indeed. And as for comments on 80, well, what's often I noticed is when I'm working from home and I leave the rig on this frequency, then quite often during the mornings at least, I hear other people popping up with reasonable signals. So I think actually it's probably a bit more usable than we tend to think, because you know, just listen there and you don't hear anything or whatever. But just occasionally, I've had people come up, you know, throughout the morning and have the odd QSO. So I think may not be quite as dead as it sounds. And certainly yesterday on 60 meters, and I don't have the bit of paper in front of me, but I think it was 7 o'clock or something like that. I can't recall now. Maybe it's been a bit later. 7:30 in the evening. And I listened on 60 meters, and there was nothing there. And I gave out a call, and I had a look on FPH site and couldn't see just about see a trace. But then I did look on the, as I mentioned earlier, on the Hack Green website, and it was quite a good signal. So you know, I think quite often the band is workable at other times, but we just tend not to use it very much. Well, hope your son's procedure goes well tomorrow, and hopefully we'll see that as a good outcome. And let me think what else. I think that's probably about it. And Ray, I'm very much very appreciative actually of all the little bits and pieces that come out of China, and particularly some of the small little circuit boards you get, you know, the size of your thumb or whatever, which are either, you know, small power supply converters or amplifiers, preamps or whatever, and very low cost, and really helpful. It sort of saves one having to bodge something up or make PCBs, and very helpful. And in fact, the noise source that I got as a sort of substitute for a tracking generator on the spectrum analyzer, I think that was like, you know, £7 or £8 or something, and it produces pretty level wideband noise right the way up to about 1 gigahertz, and slightly lower, I think, but you know, and really helpful, because I was thinking, well, I'll make something up, and then I saw that, and I thought, well, by the time I bought the components and and so forth, it's going to cost me just as much. So it's certainly very nice. Well, the sun is sort of peeking through slightly. Yesterday I did go out and cut the grass because it was getting a bit beginning to grow rather rapidly. So I think now it may be time for morning elixir. But before I do that, I'll put it back to you. Come on, me. It is early in the morning. That's what happens when you have no more elixir, Ray. Yeah, I shall put it over to you, Ray, and then next time round I'll pop a sign and go and get some of the morning elixir, which is clearly in great need. And hope the blood tests don't just show that there's more wine in your veins than there is blood. G3 VTD, G3 YJO.
Yeah, come on. I did time actually, just come back for a quickie. Yeah, okay, on the 107s, I will certainly look that up, and if I can get the advert, it was virtually a full page as far as I remember, and it was excellent artwork, so I'm trying to have a look at that this morning. Yeah, the blood test is just a very routine sort of thing, and it's not because there's any problems or looking for any problems per se. It's just to make sure that the medication that I take for mild hypertension is functioning okay. I was blessed with it from my mum, unfortunately. My dad's blood pressure was extremely low, but mum had a idiopathic hypertension, which genetic, and unfortunately it's passed on to me, so it's not raging out of control, it's just slightly elevated. But because of the work that I do, it has to be brought into the values that are acceptable by the Civil Aviation Authority, so not concerned about it. I'm looking forward to having a little play with this electric mic actually. I think I might buy one and send it on to Mike. GPLHX might save him a little bit of time building things together. I think it was only about £1 or something like that. Something incredibly cheap, and I'm going to have a little play with that and see what sort of output it produces, and I think the audio quality will be a lot better than the carbon mic, so I could hide it away inside the carbon mic case. You went way down on the last over, Brian, so perhaps you're not hearing much from this, so I'll not ramble on, and hopefully catch up with you tomorrow and see how propagation is. And I think you're right, Martin, that there are times during the day when I've listened on 80 and there's been some good signals about. We assume we get this lovely sort of grey area on the morning, and where signals are very good before the delay kicks in. But even when it's kicked in, sometimes there's some nice signals to be had. Just looking at your modulation envelope actually as well, Martin, you're one of the rare 19 sets that show some positive excursions. Most of the 19 sets have a unit of carrier which then goes down as people modulate, and you've obviously got the level just right with yours, because there are the other excursions into the positive region, and it's not all negative going stuff, which good modulation obviously is very characteristic of. Okay, 7-3s, I'm going to get some breakfast and hopefully catch up with you in the morning. G3VTD signing with G3YDO, G4LJC. I'll pass it back to you, Brian, because it's just about cornflakes time. You might just want to nip in there. And bid you all a very good morning from Golf 3 Victor Tango Delta.
Yeah, G3YJ. Well, Brian signed. Let me just make sure. Yeah, G3YJO, yep. Brian had signed, so he'd gone off to get cornflakes. All noted on the blood test, and well, that's glad to hear that. And yes, it'd be interesting to see the R107 drawing. See if it's a half page or full page, it would be quite impressive. The other thing that you mentioned, which I said, oh yes, and we'll come back on that, and now that's, oh yeah, the electric mic. Yeah, well, it'd be interesting to hear what that sounds like. And yes, the same thought did pass through my my mind as well. That just go and get one of these little preamps and put it in the post to Mike MHX and see if he can get that to improve his mod, because there are times when it actually works. His works quite well, and he sounds quite good. And then there are other times when it just the whole thing goes to pot in a bad way, and that sort of is a bit of a shame, really. But let's say the same thought occurred to me, I have to say. And 19 set, well, yeah, thanks to the report. In fact, I was quite careful in setting this up, as we, I think, discussed on previous occasions. Being grid mod, you want to give the grid a bit of room to move. But I think what has often happened in the 19 set is that people try to get more power out of the 807 by increasing the drive. And then, of course, there's not much room for mod except downwards. So what I've done is to set it up and trying to remember now. I think it's oh yeah, I'm looking at it at the moment. It's exactly 2.5 watts coming out of the 19 set, and it does look appears to be upwards modulation on both the well, the output power and the aerial current meter. And of course, I can get 5 or 6 watts out of it quite easily by changing the drive, but then of course it's all downward mod. So I think that's the secret, if there is a secret. So with that, I'm going to go off and put on the elixir and gird the loins and all the rest of it for the day, and get on with a bit of work, and hopefully find some space here to do a bit of radio work during the day as well. So with that, I'm going to wish you a very good morning, Ray, Brian, if you're still listening, and Trevor, and of course any shortwave listeners, and I will stay listening on this frequency, and then in a little bit I shall also switch on the 60-meter rig, and if anybody's fancies a QSO on 60 meters, then give out a call, and if I'm in the room I'll come back. So with that, a very good morning to everybody, and G3YJO now listening on the band. Cheers everybody.
G3XGW.
I'll just quickly reply to Martin, if I may. Keith, very good morning to you. Yeah, I've got the same dilemma really here, Martin, with the screen mod. Basically, this transmitter can deliver 100 watts of carrier if I give it the full screen voltage. But of course, to be able to modulate it on the screen, you've got to pull the screen way down and then torque it up. So it runs about 50 watts of carrier, and then as you modulate it, it goes upward, which is quite desirable. But say most 19 sets that I've seen, looking at the envelope on the 1155 coming out of the IF, they don't go very much into the positive modulation cycles. They just seem to start with a peak carrier and torque it down, which is quite audible, very readable, but seems to be one of the exceptional ones where you get the positive excursions. When you speak up, when you talk quietly, it's sometimes difficult, but as soon as you speak it up, you get this wonderful excursions into the positive regions, and it's so much more readable. So a slightly critical comment there, my apologies. Right, I'm going to leave you in the tender care of the lovely XGW, and now I'm going to get some breakfast. So very good morning to you, Keith. I can't stay. I've got an appointment this morning, so I'll leave you. And I hope you're well. G3XGW to take it. G3VTD signing and going QRT. Very good morning, chaps.
Yes, okay, Ray, fine. Very good morning to you. I take it you're just back from your Greek holiday. We're off to a different Greek island this year, one we haven't been to before, called Kalimnos. Lovely name. I don't know what it would be like. So a bit of excitement. And morning to you, Martin. You seemed a bit weak this morning, but maybe just conditions, I suppose. I thought at one point the audio seemed to be fading away, but I think that was just the signal was down a bit. Bit of a miserable day, dismal morning here compared with the last few days. We haven't got any blue sky. We're just getting used to it. It's grey this morning, and I take it there's going to be a bit of rain, or a possibility of a bit of rain, as the front comes through later on. Although a bit of rain would be welcome, although I prefer it during the night, really. And yeah, we were with Bronick last night. Tony and Bronick, who was in the area, we went out for a meal. And funnily enough, I got discussing this subject of modulation with Bronick. The ladies were on one side of the table having their little chat, and we were, I'm afraid, we were doing the technical stuff, which is not very good really, but nevertheless it worked quite well. And Bronick was just talking about his GRC9 transceiver, which uses suppressor grid mod, and he was saying that he was getting this problem of no apparent increase in carrier level with mod, but only a decrease. And yeah, I think, you know, Ray obviously knows what this is all about. You've got to start at a low level to start with, otherwise you can't, you know, you can't allow it to go up on the modulation peaks. So that is the fallback of all these efficiency mod systems. You have to turn the whole thing down in the first place in order to allow it to be able to come back up again. I hear the Galileo debacle is still going on. There's more on the news this morning with Mr. Willits, I think it was, discussing it, so I assume you're taking a keen interest in that. Or is it all getting a bit beyond? Anyway, over to you, Martin. G3YJO, G3XGW.
G3XGW, G3YJO, sorry, wrong switches, just 1 minute. Make sure I got it, sorry about that. I was fiddling around with listening on the R107 and comparing it to the 19, and consequently got the switch in the wrong place. Just make sure everything is still working, which it does sort of appear to be. Yeah, anyway, on the wireless set 19 with the high power unit this morning, Keith. So considerably less power than sort of normal, so that probably accounts for the slightly reduced signal level. But you have a lovely signal on your 9 Plus, you know, absolutely armchair copy here, and very nice indeed. And okay, about the rain, well, we haven't had any here, but there's sort of high cloud, so it's not the clear blue skies that we've been used to the last couple of days. And the air temperature is quite a bit fresher. Yeah, the sun is sort of peeking through from time to time, but I suspect it's going to be a bit patchy today. But I'm going to be working from home, so actually that's quite welcome, because otherwise it does get a little bit warm if the sun is beating down relentlessly on the roof here. They've got all the windows open and everything, so it's not too bad, but it's just a little bit more pleasant when it's when the temperature's down. I mean, actually, I had to look to see what the temperature is in the shack this morning. 20 degrees, so that's yeah, very pleasant. Efficiency modulation, yeah, well, of course, as always in the world, you get nothing for free, so if you don't want to pump a lot of power in, then basically that's the trade-off you make. And I suppose, providing you sort of, it's a bit like inflation and all these things, that if you just treat the set as a 2-watt set, which has some, you know, proper modulation, so to speak, rather than knowing that the valve could produce you 20 watts and you're having to derate it, you know, then it's fine. I think the trouble is we always know that in theory you get an awful lot more out of these things on CW, and therefore you sort of feel that it's sort of hard done by. But you know, the benefit is, of course, you need peanuts to modulate it. So unlike high-level modulation, where it's either a lot more complicated and requires more power in order to add more power to the carrier. So I suppose it's all in mind as often the case. Well, glad you had a good dinner last night, and I think on those sort of occasions it's forgivable to to have the sort of bipartisan discussions that you were having, because that's the sort of nature of the gathering, and as long as the MEMSARBs are happy with that, then that's fine. And in fact, looking forward to the lunch next month when Ian comes across, because that should be good too. Right, let me think. Anything else? Not really. The R107s, Keith, have been sort of a little bit on the back burner for the last month or so, because I've been travelling and doing all sorts of things. So I've sort of only, virtually done nothing on them. So I'm hoping in the next couple of days when things are going to die down a bit, and I'll have a bit of time to get some progress on the production line. I prefer to do these things in a reasonable sort of sequence. Otherwise, you sort of get all wound up, and then you have to stop and start over. And if the stop-start is over a week or two or something like that, then it sort of doesn't really get going. So I'd rather have a time when I've got a couple of days where I can spend a reasonable amount of time each day working on it, and then you sort of build up a momentum and get through things. Alright, I think that's about it. So back to you, Keith, and I wonder how your garden is progressing this year. I found that certainly the grass has grown very, very rapidly. And, a number of things like ivy and the wisteria that's on the front of the house suddenly realised it was pretty draggy, so got out after dinner last night up the ladder and was trimming that into shape. G3XGW, G3YJO.
G3YJO, G3XGW, yes, fine, Martin. Oh, the garden. Well, yes, it's kind of more or less under control now. It was a very late start. Well, I suppose everybody had the same problem with the weather. And in fact, technically, I suppose I actually finished my winter digging the day before yesterday of the veg plot. There's one little bit that I hadn't quite managed to tackle. So get ready to put some plants in. One little bit, but so that's how late it was, you know. But everything else is coming along well, and we've got beans coming along quite well. It won't be long before we're picking those that stayed in over winter. They always look absolutely atrocious this season. The stems are sort of brown and horrible, but somehow they manage to produce wonderful leaves and a crop. But yeah, I've been into watering for the last few days. Actually, it's got that dry here. Yes. Oh, I'm pleased that you're coming along to the dinner. That'll be good. My wife and I are coming, and Tony. I think Tony might be able to persuade his good lady to come along as well. So that'll be nice. And I know that Paul and Anne are coming, or at least they were anyway. So it should be quite a nice outing. Although it's crazy, it's just crazy distance really to travel. But Tony seems quite unfazed by a 2-hour trip to dinner at a pub. So it's very brave of him. Yeah, it was a pleasant evening last night. Actually, it's very nice. Bronick was on his way down to Cornwall, so he stopped off. I guess it's kind of halfway. I mean, to go from here to Cornwall to us is a seriously long journey. But from York, I suppose you need to stop somewhere, I think. Yeah, it might be my imagination, but I just feel that your mod isn't quite as strong as it normally is on that setup. Anyway, that might I've got a bit of a burble on the frequency, which always happens during the summer, and I know exactly what it is. It's a device here, a power supply, a switch mode power supply. But all through the winter, it doesn't give any problem at all because the frequency is a little bit away from this one, and during the summer it always drifts onto this frequency, which is a bit annoying. Now I probably ought to get in there and try and move it or do something. But it's probably better just to get rid of it, to be honest. I know you had a recent problem like that, didn't you? Anyway, not much radio been going on really. It's been the problem is when it's sunny that it gets very hot up in my shack, which is in the loft, and really a bit too hot. So I might manage to get up there today if it cools down a bit. It's only 12 degrees at the moment actually. So without the sun, it's not been that hot. And in fact, it's not really been that hot, has it? I mean, it's only been in the 20s, absolute maximum 22, I think, over the last week. But it just seemed a lot hotter because we're just not used to it, I suppose, with a bit of solar power. Right, let me put it back. I'm not sure if you want to get away. I heard you mention the getting your coffee machine on the go, so we haven't had breakfast yet, so it must be getting near that time. G3YJO, G3XGW.
Yeah, G3XGW, G3YJO. Let me just slight nudge on the frequency dial. Well, I mean, it is always possible that I wasn't talking quite as loudly into the microphone, I suppose, so or putting it further away. I sort of always a bit wary because I don't want to over-modulate this 19 set because it doesn't have the any of the band limiting audio band limiting filters, and so I'm always slightly wary of overdoing it. Maybe I was a bit restrained earlier. Anyway, this is the sort of standard speaking voice and level and distance from the mouth to microphone, so see how that sounds anyway. And of course it's always possible actually that the tuning has changed slightly since I haven't used this set for well, probably about a month actually. So and I just sort of switched it on, so I haven't actually tweaked anything, but we'll see. Galileo, I forgot to mention. Yes, I missed that because I was up and about. He must have come on either before I started listening or after I got up. But in fact, I had quite a long discussion with David last night about this because I know he had been asked to come on and talk about it, and so he was just running through things to make sure he got the story straight. So I guess I could go and have a listen on the iPlayer and see what he said, assuming that it's available. But I missed that. And yes, the saga rumbles on. And of course it's very difficult to know whether this is all part of the ploy. I have to say I oscillate between thinking that the government has absolute masterly negotiating tactics which it's pursuing through to our best interests, and then on alternate days I wake up thinking that they absolutely have no idea whatsoever what they're doing and the thing's an unmitigated disaster. And I can't quite make up my mind which it is. So they're either extremely clever, extremely cunning, or utterly incompetent. Not much in between, I suspect. But there we go. So we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Hopefully, well, excuse me, I've got a frog. Yes, I think as I mentioned when we talked about this before, from our own sort of interests, I mean, from a UK interest, we should stay in Galileo and be part of the club and share the burden, as we have been up to now. But on the other hand, if we do decide to go it alone, then that would provide us with some very interesting work in the company. So sort of both ways. Hopefully we won't get something that's the worst of all of them anyway. Yes, I think it is time for the Elixir. I do need to do a little bit of work this morning. And so I better sort of get organised, and I do want to put aside a few hours to do some radio work later, so I better get organised on timing. And oh yes, on the lunch. Well, that time, it should be a good occasion. Fortunately, Memsab here works in London, so she won't be able to join us, which I'm sure she would have found interesting. I managed to pick up a collector filter for Ian, which is sitting on my side here, which I need to give him as well, and I know he's looking forward to that. So it should be a good event, and I mean, it's a very convenient location for me, but I always feel slightly guilty because it's everybody else travels definitely a long way. And certainly Bonnie coming from York to Cornwall, I mean, from here to Cornwall, having done it, is a pretty long hike. If you come from York, well, I think it's maybe just get used to it. If you live in York, you've got long hikes pretty well everywhere. So with that, back to you, and I'll sign, get off, and fire up the Elixir machine, and we'll be listening on 60 meters a bit later. And I don't know if you heard earlier, I did go on to 60, I think it was around about 7 or 8 o'clock last night, maybe nearer 8, and listened on Hank Green, and was getting quite a good signal there, but nothing on the FPH website, so interesting conditions in the late evening. So, G3XGW. G3YJ signing, but we'll be listening, and hope you have a good day there, Keith. Cheers.
G3YJ, G3XGW, yeah, fine. Yes, I think as you talk it up a bit, it's back to its normal self, I think. So perhaps you need the magic fluid. Yes. 60, yes, I did actually have a very big contact with Andy, was it yesterday, the day before, I think, G40JY, who put his TCS on to 60 meters, but it was pretty hard going, actually. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, and I think one of the problems was he was using an inverted L, so I suspect he wasn't getting really too much in the way of high angle. He was probably getting low angle off the vertical section of the inverted L. That was what I kept sort of wondered about anyway. But interesting, yes, the skip does go long, doesn't it, as you get into the evening, as it does, I suppose, on any frequency, as the different layers come in. And yes, yeah, the difference between FPH and Hank Green, there is a bit of difference, isn't there, in terms of distance from you. So that would account for it, I guess. Anyway, I do put out the odd call if I happen to be anywhere near if I'm in the garden. You see that I've got the little Fat 5 transmitter receiver in the shed, and if I need a break from the digging or the planting or whatever, I quite often pop a call out on 60 because it comes on instantly, of course, being solid state. So I shall continue to do that. Although I don't think there'll be much gardening today. It looks pretty miserable out there. All the best, and we'll see you further down, I'm sure, Martin, and look forward to seeing you at the pub at Purbright. G3YJ or G3XGW?
Yeah, G3YJ just back quickly, yes, it will be looking forward to that event. And okay, on the modulation, yeah, I think really I was just not speaking it up, and I was a little bit wary about over-modulating it, so I was probably being a bit slow on that one. Oh dear me, there was something I was going to come back on. What was it you were trying to could replay oh yeah, 60 meters and Andy OJY. Yes, I also worked him, and I think it was the day before yesterday, but I can't quite remember now. Or it might have been yesterday. And he had a reasonable carrier, but I was finding the modulation was a bit subdued. So it was very, very hard going. I think if you'd been sort of fully modulated, it would have been Q5 and about strength 8. But even sort of Q3 to 4 and strength 8 instead, and couldn't quite work out why. But there we go. Anyway, we did just about manage to get a QSO on 60, and that again was around about 4 or something in the afternoon. Right, off to the Elixir machine, G3YJO now listening. Cheers.
Cheers, Martin. See you later. G3XGW.